This is a really quick run through of configuring OBS for a basic video game streaming setup. We won't be doing anything fancy here. This will just get you up and running as quickly as possible. First, we want to choose our video sources by clicking on the plus button. You'll want to decide between two options, game capture and display capture. Display capture is your whole monitor all the time. Game capture is just your current full screen application. If you minimize, the stream will go black until you go back to the game. I generally recommend game capture because I found it to be a little bit more stable and performance friendly. Then we want to go to our audio sources. You can set up which ones are here by going into settings and looking in the audio tab. And here you choose which audio devices you want active or not. Ignore mine as my setup is somewhat unique, which I have other videos on, by the way. Generally, you'll have two devices, your desktop audio and your microphone. Then you'll want to do some tests and balance the audio levels. That's very important, and the only way to do it is really just through trial and error. So now we'll go into the settings page in more detail. Everything in general is up to you. Under Stream, you want to enter your chosen provider settings. In my case, I use Twitch, so I select Twitch, and then the nearest server because I don't trust auto. I happen to have one in my city, which is nice. And then go to your provider's website and find the stream key and copy and paste it here. And now we go to output, which is where most of the magic happens. First, we'll change the output mode to advanced. Most of this will leave default except for a few key items. Under streaming, you'll need to decide which encoder to use. I have an NVIDIA card, so I have the NVENC option. I believe AMD has something similar, but I'm not familiar with its details. For those curious, whichever one you choose, you'll be streaming H.264 video. The difference is that NVENC H.264 is a hardware H.264 encoder, while X.264 is an open source software H.264 encoder. The practical difference is that NVENC will use a specialized chip built into your GPU to do the encoding, while X.264 will use your CPU. This means two things. On the one hand, NVENC is slightly less sophisticated of an encoder, and pixel peepers will notice some differences. However, on 10 series cards and newer, those differences are tiny, and 90% of people just won't notice. X264, on the other hand, needs anywhere from 10 to 30% CPU usage. So it's a give and take. I have a GTX 1070 and I use NVENC because although it's slightly less quality, I'm just streaming video games and I'm not going to be pixel peeping, and I'd rather have the spare CPU cycles for more important things. So now that that's dealt with, set the rate control to CBR, that's constant bit rate. So go to an internet testing site, test your upload speed, and then we'll set our bit rate to about 80% of that. So you have room for other things. One caveat, Twitch won't accept anything over 6,000. So 6,000 is your upper limit, no matter what your actual ISP provider has for you. Next, we'll set our encoder preset. If you're using NVENC, just set it to high quality. If you're using X264, be aware this setting has a huge effect on the encoding detail and therefore your FPS. The only way to know what you can deal with is to test it yourself, or just leave it by default if you don't want to deal with it. Now we'll go to the recording tab, where almost all the same rules apply with three exceptions. First, you can use something other than H.264 encoders. I recommend, however, sticking with it and choosing MOV as the format and whatever your original encoder was here as well. Second, you're only recording locally, so you don't need to use CBR. I recommend using VBR, that's variable bitrate. And third, you can set your bitrate much higher because you're not dealing with Twitch's limitations. I would recommend 10,000 to 15,000 as a good compromise between file size and quality. All right, great. Now you're set here. Let's go to the video tab. Here you'll set resolution and frame rate. For 95% of people out there, you have two options. Either stream 1080p 30 FPS or 720p 60 FPS. Frame rates have as large an impact on encoding as the resolution does, so it's basically a bandwidth trade-off. Do you want to dedicate more of that bandwidth to resolution or to frame rate? Personally, for slower-paced games like Arma, I think 1080p 30 FPS is better. This is obviously largely a personal preference thing, though. So whatever you choose, though, whichever one you go with, you're going to want to set your base and your output to be the same, because you probably aren't cropping or doing anything fancy in your stream. All right, now we'll go to the advanced tab. The only part we're worried about here is the video section. choose format NV12, color space 709, and color range partial. Those are the basic color settings for almost all video you've ever seen in life outside of a movie theater. You are able to choose much higher settings here, such as 444 under color format, but there is literally no point to doing that unless you're going to be color grading or watching your video game stream on a high dynamic range monitor or a movie theater screen, which is pretty unlikely. What's happening here is that human vision is flawed, and the video encoders take advantage of that by throwing away information we're unlikely to see anyway, especially in color. So for the most part, for example, under color range, partial sounds like a compromise. It's actually going to look exactly the same to you as the original video game on your screen. You will only ever notice a difference if you take the video and you start to color grade it and move color information from a range we can't see into a range we can. But you're probably not doing that, so I would stick with NV12, 709, and partial. All right, you're set. All that's left to do is hit start and stop streaming.